Hello, everyone. We're in Alpharetta, Georgia today, and we have the pleasure of visiting with Paul Ramsburg of Sika Corporation. You may recall that Paul joined the GRMCA board when Joe Wolf rolled off and retired in 2022. So this gives us an ongoing admixture representation with the board of directors. Paul is a man of many talents and many interests, and I'm eager to hear more about his life story. Paul, please dive in and tell us about yourself.
Well, I want to thank you, Bill, for having me participate in this oral history project. I'm excited about it. I'm currently the district manager for Sika in Georgia and the Carolinas. A number of people answering to me in those three states. My focus mostly is in northern Georgia, though. And I work in the concrete division of Sika, focusing on chemical admixtures. I've done that about 15 years. Before that, I've been employed by concrete producers virtually my whole life. I grew up in Northern Virginia, Fredericksburg, Virginia, if anyone knows the area, Fauquier County. A lot of my teen years I spent there, kind of in the backside of Quantico Marine Base.
Okay.
It was an old farming community, Fauquier is. And by the 1970s, it was mostly a failing farming community. A lot of family farms were shutting down. It was too close to Washington, D.C. for factory farming. So the land was being sold off. IBM built semiconductor facilities there. A lot of subdivisions were moving in. So it's kind of the environment there I grew up in as family farms, families we knew were shutting down and leaving, and,
oh my,
and people were moving in. That kind of describes Northern Virginia 70s.
Yes.
An example I like to give of how things were at the time then, when I was in elementary school, we took a field trip to Dulles Airport, which was only about a 30-minute drive on a school bus from where I went to school. And we went to watch the Concords take off and land when the Concorde Airlines used to run. Well, the Concorde takeoff was delayed because someone's cows had broken through a fence and got out on the runway. I mean, it's funny now thinking of Dulles Airport that close to D.C. being like that, but it literally was surrounded by dairy cows, when I was growing up in Northern Virginia.
Now tell me again, roughly the years, what you just described.
So, that in Dulles Airport was probably 76, 77.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it didn't take long for that area to grow up. It was almost in the blink of an eye how quickly the farming community died away and the suburbs and industry had moved in. But, I grew up with, there were 7 of us, 6 siblings. Okay. 2 parents, 800 square foot house. The barn and the garage were bigger than the house we had.
No kidding.
What that means, though, is we spent very little time indoors. If we weren't at school, our time was spent with animals. We had a hog and some chickens and goats at times. And my dad had a huge garden. I wouldn't call it farm fields, but it was a garden. But it was 2 acres of garden.
Yes.
And so we spent our times working in the garden, working with agriculture. We weren't on that. We were at the rivers and ponds, all at the nearby farms, fishing with cousins and friends. A little bit of hunting. Turkey hunting was a favorite of mine. We had a lot of. It was a good time spending time outdoors with friends and family, and that's what I remember most fondly about growing up in that area.
Yes, 800 square feet.
Yep. So my parents. It was kind of impoverished area when it was a farming community. My parents got the internet and indoor plumbing in the same year, in the year 2000. So
they got indoor plumbing and the internet simultaneously.
Yep, my mom had enough. She was old enough by the year 2000. She complained to my dad, and he agreed to have internet put in the house, and they put in the indoor plumbing in the same year.
What a great story.
They finally joined the 21st century just in time to skip the 20th century.
Yes.
But it was good times. So a lot of time spent in the woods and the fields, and probably, I think still today, one of the best ways to raise a kid. I think.
Yes. Well, tell us about how you found your way into construction materials.
So growing up in that manner, there wasn't very few farming jobs as they were shutting down. So people were leaving farming community jobs and going towards industry. And in my family, when you turn 16, it was time to get a job. Now, some of us quit school and got a job. Some of us stayed in school and worked through it. So when I turned 16 that summer, my first job was a part-time job at a concrete facility, and it was a precast concrete facility. The reason I picked that is I had a few brothers and cousins that already worked there, and it was the closest industry to our home. So it was easy to catch a ride at 16. So I spent that summer working in a batch plant, first cleaning the batch plant, chipping out mixers.
Age 16.
At 16, yeah.
Yes.
Cleaning, chipping out mixers and shoveling up aggregate from the around the batch plant. And eventually by the end of summer, I was actually batching a little bit of concrete, and I kind of fell in love with that, with the whole process of how this was putting together at that moment. And then school started. I went back to school, but I worked holidays and weekends at this concrete plant. Gave me an opportunity, and I came out of the batch plant and then started placing and finishing concrete. So I learned to finish concrete at 16.
Let me pause you real quick. What were the products that you were making at that time there at that?
So that facility at the time was making cattle guards for ranches.
Yes.
Yeah. But they were also making sound walls along highways, manholes and box culverts and barrier walls. There was that first summer I worked on a decorative barrier wall. I had 7 different colors of concrete. It looked like a stone wall, like a faux stone wall, precast.
Yes.
And if you ever drive the Baltimore-Washington Parkway between DC and Baltimore, you'll still see that first project I worked on.
No kidding.
I batched all the architectural concrete for that.
Wow.
And you can still drive by today. It's still there.
That's very cool. So keep going. Keep talking us along the timeline.
Okay, so I worked there a number of years. Eventually, the high school I was in had a program where you could get out of school a little early to work in a job and get credits towards high school, and which I did that. So I was kind of working full time and going to high school till I finished school, and then went full time into precast concrete. And it wasn't long. I got married young, about 22 years old, and had my son shortly after that. But I stayed in the concrete industry, initially in precast, which precast is a good way to get thrown to the wolves on everything about concrete, because in that environment, you're selecting your materials, you're batching the concrete, you're placing the concrete yourselves, and
Yes.
you're seeing the finished product.
Yes.
So it's a way you can get a view of the entire
Right.
time span. You're not just doing one thing, but it's all on small scale. I mean, especially small mom and pop precursors like I was at. It's all small scale, but you do get to see every step of the process. So that was a learning adventure. Eventually, I would work at CRH. CRH Oldcastle is one of the larger concrete producers in the United States. And there I got exposure to a lot bigger picture, a lot larger scale concrete. I worked for a couple other small companies at the time. Right before I came to Sika 15 years ago, I was working at a company out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, high concrete structures. At the time, we had a ready mix operation in Williamsport, Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of precast, pre-stressed concrete. It gave me an opportunity to have my hands in a lot of yardage and a lot of technical concrete. So it was architectural, so you're focusing on color matching and texture matching and developing things that architects want to see. But also we were doing very high strength structures, mid-rise, high-rise structures. So some of the mixes were 16,000 PSI concrete.
Oh my.
So
Wow.
and sometimes that overlaps. Sometimes we're doing a highly pigmented white cement concrete mixture that had to be 8,000 PSI for a high-rise. So that position gave me an opportunity to learn a lot about material science of concrete.
So take us on further and get us to Sika. How did that opportunity come about?
So in 2009, the beginning of 2009, I came to Sika, and largely the reason was because of the economic downturn.
Right.
The company I was working at the time, they largely made parking garages for municipalities and structures for casinos. There was a lot of that happening at the time in universities. And you know the expression, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that company's basket was made out of eggs.
Yeah.
It was all eggs. So the recession did not bode well for a lot of companies in that market sector. And I went to the president of the company I was working for at the time and said, I have to move on. They were making a lot of cuts. I said, and I was training a guy up under me to take my position eventually, and he was doing really well. And it came down where it was going to be me or this guy I was training, who I'm friends with still today. And I said, I think I need to move on, and I think you can give the position to this guy coming up, and it'll be a better fit for everybody.
Now,
and,
where was this, Paul?
This was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Lancaster, gotcha.
And so I said to them, I want to know you guys' opinion. Where should I not go to work, and where would you like me to see? What do you suggest I look into? And of course, the places not to go were all their competitors.
Sure.
And I had a lot of information about their business model, and I understood that, and that's why I asked them.
Sure.
So of course I agreed to that, and I never thought about working in admixtures. In fact, if someone would have asked me at the time, "Would you ever work in admixtures?" I'd say, "No way. There's no way I'll ever do that."
That's funny.
But the president of the company at the time said, you ought to think about applying at Sika. And he wouldn't necessarily say an admixture. He's just saying that as a company. And we bought from Sika at the time. We bought from a bunch of other competing products too. But so you ought to take a look there. Now, what I know about Sika at the time in Pennsylvania is it had a great team. I love the team. Whenever I interacted with them, I didn't have to just interact with one guy. There wasn't one really good guy. Everyone I talked to on the team was great and very knowledgeable, very friendly team players. So I thought, I could work with a team like that. So I went to Sika, and of course they were excited to talk to me. And I had family in the Southeast, and they had just asked me, where would you like to go? And I said, Southeast. At first it was Greenwood, South Carolina.
Yeah.
I was there about 2 years, and then Sika asked me to come to Atlanta, which I was excited about.
Oh, yeah.
But that's ultimately how I ended up at Sika, made that transition pretty easily. Now that I'm here, I love that I came to admixtures. It wasn't what I was afraid it was when I started. When you're a concrete producer, there's a lot of challenging days you have, and they're difficult. But there's days when everything goes right and you have celebration.
Yes.
And what I'd perceived is, well, if you're an admixture guy, you're only ever going to be fixing problems for people.
And
it's all going to be challenge and no celebration. But I couldn't be further from wrong. Now, like in my current role, I celebrate with my customers.
Yes.
I get invited with my customers when we have a big win, and they come on out. We want you to be a part of it. And so now I have the challenges with the customers, and I wade through the difficulties with them, and then when there's success, they invite me in, and I get to celebrate. So it's just as rewarding as working in concrete, but I just get to see more different teams of people.
Yes. No, that makes perfect sense. Well, Paul, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit, and it's always been, when I first met you, it's obvious that you love the industry, you love concrete, and I will mention that I'm tickled to have this wonderful chess set, which I'll let you talk about in a minute and explain the history of these little chess sets that you make out of concrete. But just say a little bit for a few minutes about what it is about our industry that's particularly enjoyable and gratifying to you, that's kept you at it all of your life, really.
So two things, really. The concrete industry has a community to it that I think is different than most industries. I think everyone I talk to in other industries talks about the community, but there's still enough family businesses in the concrete industry, and we all still need each other enough that it really is a community across companies.
Yes.
And you get into corporate America, a lot of times it's just competition and only competition. But the concrete industry is different there. I see the concrete industry, a lot of people I've met along my career, as is also a second chance industry. I've seen people that had very successful lives and lose that success for a number of negative reasons.
Yes.
Major impact to their lives, and their lives really fell apart. And if they can pull themselves together And I've seen them come to the concrete industry because they had nowhere else to go, but also then turn that around and have a second success in their lives.
Yes.
And I don't know too many industries where that
That
really is
offers
possible.
that. Yes, I get it.
Yeah, I've met people that were, executives at pharmaceutical companies that ended up finishing concrete, that ended up executives at concrete companies.
That's a
They were able to turn
yeah.
around. So as a second chance industry, I don't know if that's the right term or it
That's
sounds right,
interesting.
but I've seen so many second chances at success come true. I've seen people like myself, poor farm kid growing up in kind of the poverty of a certain area, be able to become successful too. And I don't think I'm the only one. There's a lot of people
Yes.
who are able to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. The American dream really
Yes.
is still alive. As much as we hear complaints about it not being alive, it's still alive in concrete. So that's one thing I like about the concrete industry, that community. The other thing is I'm science-minded. In
Yeah,
school,
I know you are.
my favorite subject in school is science. I like that the world fits together in building blocks, and nowhere is that more true than a
Yes.
yard of concrete. We want the concrete to do something. We don't have to be slave to the concrete. We can manipulate the ingredients, the proportions, the timing. We can manipulate all these features of concrete to make it do what we want to do. And
Yep.
and it's an endless number of variables to study, so it never gets boring.
Right.
You'll spend your whole career and still not figure out all the variables, so there's plenty of variability to work with. But the more you focus on it, the more control you can have over that concrete, and you realize you don't have to wait and let the concrete do what it's going to do. You can manipulate that to your advantage.
No, that's good. Those are two great points. Well, since I brought up the chess set, take just a moment quickly and explain what I was talking about.
Oh yeah. So if I didn't get enough concrete at work, I started doing some concrete projects at home too. So a lot of my friends do woodworking or other skills. So I thought, what skill am I going to apply? Well, I really like molding. So I work with latex as a molding material. I build my own molds. I may sculpt an original out of clay and then build a latex mold around that, and then I can cast concrete into the shapes. And I started, the first thing I ever made was a concrete beer stein. I made other things, decorations and stuff out of concrete. And I settled on this chess set. What it is, it's called the Lewis chess set. It's the shape of each of the pieces. It's the oldest known fully complete chess set ever found. It was found in a cave in Scotland by a fellow named Lewis. So it's the Lewis chess set. And I made little pieces about 2 to 3 inches tall. And chess board also is made out of concrete. The pieces in the board are roughly 12,000 psi. But the detail on them is amazing.
It is. It's beautiful.
Like all the little pieces are actually little knights and kings and queens.
Yes.
Like the faces and the armor you can see, and the horses. So I love making that. I pop out a few of them every holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas. I'll get some time and I'll make a few of them. The board itself, the checkerboard pattern is etched into the concrete with acid, so it's kind of acid etched. And, all of it's kind of pigmented to various colors. So that's probably the most involved thing I've made out of concrete.
Right.
But every year I'm looking, what's my next thing?
What's your next project?
And if I'm ever in the garage tinkering, it's tinkering on making molds to cast stuff.
Well, since we're on the hobby interest thing for a second, and we can go down this rabbit trail for a long time. But let me ask you, there's another thing that you do that I think some listeners may enjoy hearing about. Your, for the lack of a better word, distillery. Is that the right term, or what would you?
That's right. So back in the 90s, I used to brew my own beer. I got into brewing beer, and I found out that making a beer recipe is not too different than making a concrete mix design either. The same skill set applies. The same skill. You're still using specific gravities and
Right.
volumes. Same skill set applies, and got okay with that. Shortly before the pandemic, though, I didn't have enough time. Beer takes a lot of time. I thought I liked doing this. I like the science kit nature of that, but I stumbled on a place in Cumming, Georgia, Vengeance Stills, that manufactures and sells stills. I just popped in one day driving by for work and talked to a guy there, and he convinced me that it's easy enough to do. So I found a still I like. They helped me set it up, and I I started distilling in my garage. I live in the suburbs up in Cumming, Georgia, so I started distilling in my garage. You know, I pop my garage door open and run it. My neighbors come over, we make a big deal out of it. But I make a rum recipe. I have a bourbon recipe, an Irish whiskey, and then some corn liquor. It makes good giveaways sometimes, but it is a fun hobby. It is absolutely. My agriculture background helps me with fermentation. You know, fermentation is just yeast farming, like you're farming any animal. And then running the still is just time and temperature, like curing concrete. And then the real art to it is aging it and selecting oak and timing and humidity and temperature of aging. But every bit of it is fascinating to me.
Yes. No, that's really, and I've had a taste of, and you've been kind to share a little bit of it, and it is very, very tasty. Back to ready mix and your world that you're in today, it would be interesting to hear what would you say from the ready mix producer's view, your customers, when they look to you, when they look to Sika, and say, what are their primary expectations of admix suppliers in this day and age?
Well, really, it boils down to two things. It's products. Do you have the products, the technology that helps them have an edge in the market now? Technologies change constantly, very rapidly nowadays, and the admixture technology has to keep up with concrete technology. So that's a given. You have to have the technology that's going to give them an edge in the marketplace. So if you can provide that, what they're really looking for out of someone like myself is service.
Yes.
90% of it's answering the phone or showing up when you're needed.
Yes.
Right? It's being there when you need to be there, being there with answers or an ability to find the answers. So a lot of our industry involves problem solving, and a lot of that happens not through cracking open a book, but through trial and error. So do you have problem solving skills? That's important. But one of the key features that I think someone needs to have is the ability to communicate, but communicate to all types of people.
Right.
Everyone has some communication skills. The real value is, can you communicate to the guy that's finishing the concrete in his language?
Yes.
Can you communicate to the guy batching the concrete in his language? Can you communicate to the customer in a language they understand? Because everyone that touches concrete has their own vocabulary.
That's a great point.
And they
really
don't share vocabularies. But really, and you develop that through talking to all of them, constantly communicating with all of them.
No, that's good. Very good. Another question, and I think the way I'm wording this, hopefully it makes sense, but what, in today's world with concrete, is there a particular issue as it relates to our product or the industry that if it were to be resolved or addressed would constitute a real breakthrough, something that would be revolutionary and game-changing? If somebody could figure it out, does that make sense? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think the answer really comes down to what are the hot topics that people are struggling with, because there's a myriad of issues that could resolve and be game-changing for some people.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at the industry as a whole, probably two things I'd focus on.
What are some of those? Yeah.
I'd focus on, I think the largest one right now in the industry is shrinkage, volume change of concrete.
Okay.
And there are ways to reduce shrinkage. There's ways to address shrinkage. They can sometimes be complicated or expensive. So if someone were to have a simple to use, inexpensive way to address shrinkage, that would change. And I mean, don't be fooled.
Changer.
Yeah, but don't be fooled. Every chemical company in the world right now is working on that. Whoever cracks the egg first will be extremely successful. But that's why I think focusing on that is probably the number one issue that could be game changing. Is I know everyone's working on this issue.
Right.
It's a hot topic for everybody. The other one I'd focus on is efflorescence.
Okay.
For the listeners, if you don't know what efflorescence is, if you ever look at a brick home or a brick wall and there's white substance is kind of leaking out of the grout joints between the bricks, or you see the concrete wall, the crack, and there's white material that seems to be leaking out. This is salts and calcium that's leaking through the concrete paste. This is efflorescence. It can be very difficult if it doesn't be cleaned right away. That stain may be fairly permanent.
So it's an aesthetic.
It's an aesthetic issue,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't affect concrete structurally, but if you're buying architectural concrete,
Right.
it's the
It's a
world.
big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. There are ways to help reduce efflorescence or help address it, but if there was a simple, easy to use way to knock it out completely and be confident about it, that would change the world to anyone doing decorative concrete.
Right. No, that's good. Very, very good. Let's see here. When you think about, and you've been in this business since you were a boy, literally,
Yeah.
what would you say, what comes to mind in terms of like the big earth-shattering industry changes? That might be a little strong language, but you know what I mean. The big, over the years that you've been in concrete, and what were like big milestones along the way, in whether it's in the admix or in processes or in management systems or technology. What comes to mind for the big changes, you think?
Yeah, when it comes to materials, by the time I was finishing concrete in the 80s, superplasticizers, high range water reducers were already around, but they weren't as strong as what they are today.
Okay.
They were very new and they weren't very predictable and they didn't hold slump very long. So those new first generation high range water reducers, boy, they allowed us, instead of placing and finishing 3-inch slump, they allowed us to place and finish a 5-inch slump.
Yes.
And that seemed world changing to me at the time. But
that
then,
was in the 80s, right?
That's in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't very long before we started to see better and better high range water reducers, where by the 90s we're finishing and placing and finishes an 8-inch slump. And then right around the year 2000, 2001, I was a technical director for a company, and self-consolidating concrete came to the United States. And then now we're looking at a 30-inch flow to concrete, a mixture that's virtually self-leveling. So when I think of when I first started screeding and finishing and raking concrete at 3 inches of slump, and then it wasn't that long before we're pouring flowable concrete with less water than the 3-inch slump had. That was groundbreaking change over that time. I've met people now that have never poured conventional concrete, especially in the precast environment. Yeah. I know guys that have worked in concrete 15, 20 years, and they've never seen a conventional slump. That's how accepted, flowable, self-consolidating concrete is. Or even in the ready-mix environment, I know concrete finishers have only ever finished an 8-inch slump or greater. So the industry certainly has changed a lot.
That's big. That's profound.
It's starting to make me feel a little old talking about that. But the other technology that has changed, that has been kind of groundbreaking, is these specialized hatches on ready-mix drums. So Sika has a smart hatch system. There's other companies that have other hatches. And the hatches will tell you something intelligent about the concrete.
Yeah.
For example, Sika's smart hatch system will tell you the air entrainment content of a yard of concrete, or the concrete in the drum. So it's giving you a real live reading of air content of concrete, temperature, can slump. There's systems that'll tell you all these attributes, how much concrete's in the drum. Some of them will tell you which direction the drum is spinning, and the GPS will tell you where the drum's at.
Right.
So there's nothing we can't know about that concrete real time. And it's all through these technological advancements that we can attach to a concrete drum and get to know a lot more about it. So this has enhanced quality control features and enhanced our understanding of the material science of our concrete. That's been a big change.
That's been really big.
But for me, when I step back, a remarkable change has been safety. When I started finishing concrete, I was 16 when I started finishing concrete. I didn't wear a hard hat or a safety vest. In fact, I didn't wear a shirt. I was out there,
spatter all over you.
Yeah, they were lucky if I had boots and jeans on when I came to finish concrete. But a lot has changed. There was a lot of injuries over that forced us to do that change, and a lot of the safety change were forced on the people who are pouring concrete. And good, it should be.
Right.
And we're all better off for it.
Right.
A lot more of us are coming home with all our fingers and toes to our families. But that's been a huge benefit. It really has changed the attitude of people
Yeah.
are focused on safety. It's changed I guess the morale around job sites. So that's been a big change. I think we should take a minute to reflect how far we've come in the world of safety at our job sites.
That's a great point. I'm really glad you brought that up. We should think about it all. What we do, it is definitely an incredibly safety conscious industry now, and to your point, it does affect morale in a big way. When you look back over the years, Paul, who are some of the really influential people in your life, and what ways do you think, when you think about some of the highly influential people, in what ways did they affect how you think, how you lead, how you operate? Anything come to mind? Anyone come to mind?
Yeah, actually, I love this question. In fact, I think about this a lot, and I think everyone should. As you develop yourself through your career, you should take a minute to think who's influenced you and what you were able to glean from those people. And I think that helps you steer further development in your life. When you think about the next 10 years, it's good to reflect on what you got out of the last 10 years. And also reflecting on who's helped you the most helps you pick who you'll surround yourself with going forward. So I think it's an important question for everyone to ask themselves. I made a little list on the paper here, but I'd have to start my list with my oldest brother, Larry.
Huh.
So when I started in precast at 16, my brother Larry was already plant manager at the facility. And he didn't cut me any slack. In fact, him and my brother Bart were both working there, and I think they were harder on
you, weren't they?
And good.
Yeah.
And it should be that way. But I learned a lot about not just concrete and how to place and stuff, but I think a big lesson was the pour never stops. There would be some kind of crisis happen, or a piece of equipment breaks down, or something goes wrong, but people will throw their hands up. But for him, it never stopped. Use your problem-solving skills, fix the problem, the pour goes on. And that kind of work ethic, I think I picked up on and was able to have a lot of success with focusing on that. But Larry also told me his management style, and at the time when I was young, didn't mean anything to me.
Right.
But it does now. And I think he learned that from a mentor of his. He said his management style was firm but fair. He called it the 6 F's. Firm but fair, fun and friendly.
Yeah.
If you mess up, you're fired. You can infer the F, the 6 F. But I think you learn a lot of that. Firm but fair is be fair with the people and that respect you. You gain fun and friendly. Yeah, your work should be enjoyable, and then there should be accountability too.
Yes.
And I've applied, as become a manager later in life, I've applied that. It's served me well. But I left that position and went on in my career, and largely working in batching concrete or placing concrete or finishing. I met a guy in Florida named Klaus Barna. Klaus Barna was a technical manager for a company I was working for at the time. And I'd had some conversations with him. He was in the Air Force. He was of German descent and had a thick German accent. And we'd have some conversations about, American versus European politics or whatnot. And Klaus one day said, "Hey, I think you're doing the wrong job. You should be in quality control." And he's the first person that ever identified an aptitude before I even realized it about myself. So he saw in me an aptitude for material science. And he said, "Come on over." I resisted at first, but he convinced me. And he really took me under his wing and taught me a lot of initial stuff about quality control procedures and what's important, the necessity of having a keen eye, and the eye for details. So Klaus got me into technical materials. And then later, when I was at CRH, I met a guy named Tony DaCosta. He was a technical services manager at CRH. And Tony DaCosta was a short, little, gruff Portuguese man that smoked cigars constantly. But he knew more about concrete than anybody had met at the time.
Right.
And he taught me all about durability and long-term perspective of concrete. Forget 28 days and everything happens up there. What happens after 28 days? And Tony taught me a lot of that and more to material science. So I'm meeting people, and those guys probably all knew all this stuff. They seen where I was at, and they gave me the
Address
knowledge
that
for the
particular,
next. They got me to the next step. And then, there's other people along the way, but two people I have to mention in the admixture world is the guy that taught me my first mix design, how to make a mix design. There's a fellow named Bob Swope, and he works in Virginia and Maryland. He sells Sika products up there. But Bob Swope taught me how to make my first mix design in a very logical manner, and gave me a lot of guidance. And he got me into where I really understood the concrete and could design concrete not just for the quality control numbers, not just for the budget, but so guys placing and finishing were happy with their mix. The true nature of mix design, it's not proportioning. When you design a mix, you design it for everyone involved.
That's a good point.
The guys in the front office, the guys placing, finishing, handling, everybody in the organization has to be involved and happy with it. And that's truly what mix design means. And then I think the last person on my list would be when I was a producer last, my Sika salesman was a guy named Bobby Frontino. And Bobby taught me the true value of being there when needed. He was always there. He always had a kind word. He always listened when there was an issue, and then he was always helpful about finding the solution. Even if he didn't know, he knew a bunch of people, so he knew who to talk to find an answer. And right now, how I desire to be as an admix supplier, I constantly think, what would Bob Frontino and Bob Swope do? How were they to me? That's the admix supplier I want to be. So I'd have to give credit to them too, quite a bit for shaping who I am today.
No, that's really, really good. Really good. Changing gears a little bit, Paul, you're on our board. You're on our technical committee, and you've recently taken over the leadership of our education subcommittee. We've had our second ever day of concrete here not long ago down at GDOT Forest Park. It went really, really well. And I'd like to hear your views on benefits of membership to the GRMCA. What, people sign checks, write checks, pay their dues, as you know. What do they get? What do you get by being a member from your point of view?
Yep, from a 10,000 foot view, from a large view, we can sit by ourselves and complain about the issues facing the concrete industry, or we can get together and do something about them. And that's where GRMCA comes in. It's an opportunity for us to get together and better the industry and the challenge we're facing together. But GRMCA is going to fix those issues whether it's producers involved or not.
That's right.
But if the producers involved, they have a voice in the solution. So if you're not involved in GRMCA, then you can't complain when the solution doesn't involve how you were going to do something.
Good point.
So it's important to be involved for that. We are going to fix the issues, so we'd love to hear everyone's take, everyone's voice in it. And then the other thing is the education involved. We can all learn more. No, you won't find any concrete expert that knows it all. So getting involved, working together through the technical committee for your technical people in your organization, it betters the industry. It betters your people. So you could use GRMCA committee structure as part of rounding out your personnel. We're all thinking about succession planning. If one lesson we learned over the past 5 or 10 years is we all need to take very seriously succession planning and workforce development. Part of that workforce development could be participation on the committee and subcommittee structure through GRMCA. In the education subcommittee, we could use more people.
Yes.
So if you have an up-and-coming quality control person, up-and-coming plant manager, someone that wants to get involved, it would behoove your organization to have them be a participant so that your company can benefit from it.
No, those are really, really good points. I'm glad you brought them up. And for my being back the last couple of years, I'm so impressed with the generosity from a knowledge standpoint in the technical committee. When we come together and have our meetings, it's like a bunch of scientists and a bunch of troubleshooters and concrete gurus who are just open to sharing everything. So it's a beautiful environment for, as you point out, someone that's learning, an up and coming technical person or whatever. And it's a chance to participate in problem solving. So those are great points, and I'm glad you mentioned those. The last question, the last topical area that I'd love to hear about from you is, and you've alluded to this already, but people coming into our industry, and I said young people, but young, old, but if people who come into our industry, what advice do you have for someone if you're hiring someone new into your team? How would you advise them to be successful?
Yeah, one of the first things I'd love to address is that of communication. I mentioned a little before, but it is really important. And I think today's generation probably has a little less communication skills than they did when I was coming up, because in our communities, we're forced to talk to older people, younger people, a lot of people. Young people today probably only see their peer group for a lot of their youth. But being able to communicate to all types of people in all kinds of positions is important. So broadening communication skills is paramount. One of the best things I ever did was there's an organization called Toastmasters.
Yes.
If you're not familiar, it's a small group. It's a large group, but you can join a small chapter where you're forced to do public speaking in different scenarios, and it's been extremely beneficial. So when people approach me on my team or other people I know, what can I do to advance? If you can find a Toastmasters group, join that, or some other group that does something similar, but work on public speaking and work on communication skills with a variety of people. It's extremely important. The other is have fun with it.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, obviously concrete's fun for me, but I think it can be for everybody. It's so multifaceted. You can find something about this industry that's fun and important to you. And I think finding the joy in the concrete industry and what you enjoy doing will help you be successful. Absolutely.
Well, Paul, those are some really great tips, great points, and I'm so delighted that we got to sit down. I knew a good bit about you, but I've learned more today, and I hope our listeners have too, and they'll get to know you and your invitation to join our technical committee and get involved and get involved with the education committee. I appreciate your putting that out there. But again, thank you for taking time out of your day to come join us.
I appreciate it.